Welcome to the Sankofa Ancestor Shrine, where, every week, we invite spiritual Black folk to reconnect with our ancestors as we journey through the crossroads. Please consider donating through patreon.com/Sankofa Shrine. Mother Earth, our helper, healer, and most powerful teacher. We put our hands towards your soil and take these moments to remember all the ways we interact every day that we may forget or look over in our haste. We remember in gratitude you, our great mother who sustains us and all of those on the planet. We remember in gratitude the sun high above, which gives us daylight and helps the plants grow. We also give thanks to the moon and stars, which shine so bright when the sun is gone, the moon moving the tides in the seas below. We remember with gratitude the winds and sky which bring new seeds and change. We are thankful for the clouds, the rains, the rivers, streams, and oceans, the natural cycle which gives us water. Returned thanks to the plants which heal us and sustain us, house us, and teach us. And we return thanks to you, Mama Earth. We renew our promise to protect you and continue to be a student who learns of your ways as we continue on our lives' journeys. Hitepu. All right, let's start with 3 deep cleansing breaths.
Your principles have touched my femininity. Hetero Pure blessings from my heart. Pure blessings from my soul. I'll share my love for all to see. Beloved, 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 beloved. Who would believe your grace would move me so that I'd be admiring you? Who would have known that not so long ago I could ever be so impressed with you? Hetero, pure blessings from my heart. Pure blessings from my soul. I'll share my love for all to see. Beloved, 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 Sister Queen, you should
Remember, beauty comes from within. I don't think she's beloved. Now that's not hetero. Hello and welcome to the Sankofa Ancestor Shrine. I'm your host, Sacred Woman Practitioner Tatami, and today we're going to be reading the book, The Sacred Tree by J.H. Philpot, and reading more of the African traditional religious concepts in the book, as well as a few others, and seeing how they can apply to our modern life, if there are traditions that do still apply, and really discussing those and how they can work with us and while we're working our roots and working with our ancestors. First, I wanted to go ahead and remind you there is a free PDF of this prayer book on ritualready.com. I'll be leaving the link for it down below, and you can go ahead and use this PDF, print the pages for whatever you want them for, to use as a prayer book at home, to share with friends, to upload to groups and other places where you think people might be interested, to spread it far and wide and where have you, to others, or use as a circle, an event, wherever it is you want to use these pages. Please feel free to go ahead. Also, I wanted to let you know that the 2021 spiritual planner should be coming out. My hope is to have it come out Halloween or High John Day, I believe is, oh no, it's Man at the Crossroads Day, I believe is what it was dubbed by some of our elders in the conjure community. So I thought would be a really wonderful day to just consistently put it out on, just because we're kind of reclaiming that holiday. I didn't do it last year. I found out about it kind of too late to really fully participate, but I do plan on participating this year. And of course, the release of the spiritual workbooks will coincide with that this year and hopefully all years afterwards. So please be on the lookout for that. That will also have the free PDF version, but will also have the version available for purchase through Amazon.com. All right. let's get into our talk for this beautiful Ancestor Monday. Like I said, the book we're going to be reading excerpts from is The Sacred Tree by J.H. Philpot. It was written in 1897, so it does contain some kind of offensive language for those of you who will be downloading the book and reading it yourself. I will be trying to avoid as much of that as possible because I just don't find it necessary to throw in things like primitive or like they use a lot of like negro and just weird terms for things that's just like this wasn't necessary though. Like this part's kind of opinion. You like she'll write what happens or he or she, I'm assuming a he actually, but they will write they're kind of what happens, but then definitely insert a little too much opinion, but it does absolutely give a very comprehensive world view of how people worked with trees, either with the spirits within the trees, with the trees symbolically, with the trees energetically, metaphorically, somehow spiritually. And I mean, I just don't feel that the person who was writing it, when they were saying primitive, really meant it more like ancient or like older times. They really definitely mean it like lesser than. So it's very interesting to me. But at any rate, it's funny the ones that they choose to use the words for as much as others. At any rate, we're going to start with the very beginning, which is one of the first things you will read in chapter 1, which was tree worship and its distribution and origin. So they say the original conceptions of the tree spirit. This part I'm only reading not because it's even full sentences or thoughts, but because it gives a real comprehensive look at what the book goes over. And so this may, interest you. I found the book largely very interesting to read all the different places in different ways and concepts and who, leans more towards this or that. But anyway. Illustrations of the evidence for tree worship from archaeology, from folklore, from literature, from contemporary anthropology. Earliest record of tree worship, the Cylinders of Chaldea, which was a country that eventually became Babylon in the early 9th, mid 6th centuries BC. The symbol of the sacred tree, its development, meaning of the symbol, tree worship among the Semites, Canaanite tree worship, the Asherah, the decoration of the temple at Jerusalem, tree worship in ancient Egypt, the sacred sycamores, survival of the worship in the Sudan and in Africa generally. Osiris was originally a tree god compared with other vegetation spirits, Tammuz, Adonis, Attis, Dionysus, the sacred trees of the Persians. Tree worship still existent in India, evidence of its ancient prevalence, its incorporation in Buddhism, other instances of tree worship in the East, and the evidence from America. So, yes, the first thing that we get into here, so that's just, an overview, but it's very cool to see how it's used so much worldwide. I mean, there are, notably some people missing from this. We have the islander cultures, for example, aren't really brought up here, and I'm sure they had something similar. So at any rate, that would be interesting to learn about, but I'm sure there's gaps in this knowledge just because the book is so old. So the first thing that I had copied to share with you from this book referred to those Chaldean cylinders, the place that eventually became Babylon. And essentially these cylinders were like a cylinder, but they had these carvings onto them, so you would roll them onto mud. And now some of these images, especially the older ones, were very simple and not exactly symmetrical, but basically symmetrical. Sometimes there would be one or two things missing, and so it would be a very short image to just roll, and then later on they would become a lot more complex with different people and things on them, and maybe nothing to do with trees at all. But a lot of the original ones did have to do with these trees, and it showed they would just be rolling them down. So anyways, that's what they're talking about when they refer to these cylinders, is essentially like some of them would just be like a stick with just lines, you know, and that was a tree. But it eventually did become more complex and end up looking a lot more interesting and very beautiful for these little sacred objects. So they start with the strange persistence of the strange persistence. You know, they see what I mean? They start off, even the very first sentence, how can I even, this persistence. Could they not have just said there has been a persistence of using trees in spirituality for a long time? But no, they have to add in everything. So this persistence of a religion and the very birthplace of a most exalted spiritual worship is an additional evidence of its remarkable vitality. For there is no country in the world where the tree was ever more ardently worshipped than it was in ancient Palestine. Among the Canaanites, every altar to the god had its sacred tree beside it. And when the Israelites established local sanctuaries around their influence, they set up their altar under a green tree and planted beside it, as its indispensable accompaniment, an Asherah, which was either a living tree or a tree-like post, and not a grove as rendered in the Authorized Version. The Asherah was undoubtedly worshipped as a sacred symbol of the deity. So here they start off with, we're more in the Middle Eastern areas, you know, for this beginning of the conversation. We're not quite in Africa yet, but I did really love the way that this book talks about the building of an altar and the tree beside it as someone in the same, or with the altar being under the tree. We're going to get into some of this later. That's a very African concept too. It most likely originated there, wherein you often see these big trees which have been, you know, communicated with, a relationship is being built with them. It's near the home, on the property often, or it can be in the city if you don't have a property like that. But you know, often people will just, they'll pin up on it like a white cloth and set up underneath an altar underneath the tree. So this is often a permanent setup, but it can be a brief setup, let's say for like a festival, a one-day thing, a one-day event at a park or something like that. Or it could be, you know, something that you just build when you spend time at your local national park, and you take it down when you leave, and you take those things with you. So, you know, there are different ways that people do it in the modern times, but this building of an altar underneath a very lush, beautiful tree, and putting time, effort into it, those offerings, associating them with certain ancestors. I mean, we'll get into all of that. But yes, I really do love the planting of a tree next to an altar, a permanent structure of an altar. You know, that's things that we'll eventually think of when we make our own physical space for the Sankofa Ancestor Shrine. The Asherah was undoubtedly worshipped as a sacred symbol of the deity, so this tree. Originally, it appears to have been associated with Ashtoreth, or Astarte, the Syrian Istar, the character of whose worship perhaps explains the biblical denunciations of people in that area. But the Asherah was also erected by the altars of other gods, and in pre-prophetic days, even beside that of Jehovah himself. Whence it may be concluded that in early times tree worship had such a vogue in Canaan that the sacred tree or the pole, its surrogate, had come to be viewed as a general symbol of a deity. So that was a quote. I'm not sure exactly from who. I think it may be Eusebius, because that's the name of somebody in the quote he uses just a few sentences later. But I think that's so interesting that, as much as people will denounce, say this, say that, this doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. It has always been a very strong symbol of spirit, of that connection, of the connection of the spiritual energy from the earth up above, and the way it, cycles through us, between us, and the connection we can have. So this idea that even in the beginning, especially Christians, everybody, it didn't matter who you worshipped, what you worshipped in this area of the Middle East, it was seen as a symbol of respect. It was seen as a way to connect with whoever your spirit might be. And of course you wouldn't just, go up to any random tree at those times and just build your altar next to it. It was you built your altar, and then you planted the tree, and you cared for the tree. He's saying it's in vogue, so it's just in style. But I think a better way to describe it would be that, this is just, a way of connecting with spirit that's pretty universal, and people understood it as a universal way to just connect with the spirits that you were trying to connect with, the deity that you were trying to connect with. So yes, I think that that's something that we can also keep in mind for ourselves. Having small indoor trees is a lot more of a possibility than it used to be. There are ways to buy seeds online and try and grow a tree. There are so many different ways to do this. So I think keeping that option available, understanding it, and understanding trees and the use of them. I think bamboo, would be a really good example of this. I know a lot of Black folks will have bamboo in their homes that they care for and they love and they help it grow. My mother-in-law was definitely one of those people, and literally within days of her passing, that bamboo just like gave out. It was just not gonna have it. It didn't want me. It didn't want anybody else. It was just kind of done. And it went from very flourishing, super tall, to just like wilted and not feeling it so quickly. She took such good care of it, way beyond what I even understood people did with their plants back then. Like, I didn't understand the singing to your plants and all that stuff. So it just like wasn't in my MO at all. I didn't know. So anyways, that is kind of a cool example though, because bamboo, what is that to people? It's just something that, because we're all together and it's so accessible, most of us in a lot of the places that Black folks live, there's often a place Asian people live not too far from us. And it doesn't really matter which kind of Asian restaurant, unless you get a little too far to India, you're gonna find bamboo sold there in very beautiful planters. It's clearly sacred, it's clearly spiritual, it's clearly well made by people who really understand the art, so it's something that people have incorporated into their own spirituality, as just a beautiful accompaniment, right? So here we go. The great antiquity of the cult in Syria was recognized in the local traditions for an old Phoenician cosmogony. Quoted by Eusebius states that the first men consecrated the plants shooting out of the earth and judged them gods, worshipped them, and made meat and drink offerings to them. So I think that was a good judgment. I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't. That's as close to the physical evidence, right, as a lot of people get. In addition to the Asherah, the Chaldean symbol of the sacred tree, between its supporters. Okay, so that's another one that it's going to come back up later in a different continent, one that people usually judge as totally cut off from a lot of people. But essentially with these cylinders, they would have the tree, and then they eventually would have two figures beside on either side of the tree. So it wasn't perfectly, what am I saying? Symmetrical. It wasn't perfectly symmetrical on both sides, but it was, a person. It was even on both sides, a person on both sides, the tree between them, that sort of thing. So they had, this symbol eventually became familiar to the Phoenicians, and it's found wherever their art is, notably in Cyprus and on archaic pottery of Corinth and Athens. book notes are very similar, are found later in Mexico and South America, like very similar, literally, except in their style. It's a tree with two people on either sides, almost exactly, just parallel. You feel like they would be related in some ways. But this is just more evidence that it's likely that prior to Columbus, other peoples found their way to the New World and influenced people who had already found their way to the New World. Um, so it's highly probable that these sacred symbols had common origin, but the connection must have been lost sight of in later times, for we find in Ezekiel, to whom the prophetic denunciations of the Asherah must have been familiar, decorating the temple of his visions with designs evidently derived from the Chaldean sacred tree. It was a palm tree between a cherub and a cherub. So go figure, this symbolism continues to grow, be borrowed, be taken and used and manipulated for different things. And that's because, sometimes these symbols are what's available. Sometimes it's what symbols are, around, and they make sense to the people who are there. They make sense for what they are, so them become used for those things. We do that here. And our ancestors did it. A similar ornamentation with the palm trees and cherubim, it will be remembered, had been used in the temple built by Solomon. Amongst the ancient Egyptians, whose exuberant piety required, according to M. Maspero, an actual rabble of gods to satisfy it, trees were enthusiastically worshipped side by side with other objects as the homes of various divinities. So they were worshipped as the homes of, various gods and peoples in the lexicon of the Egyptian lore and religion. So the splendid green sycamores, which flourish here and there as though by miracles on the edge of the cultivated land, their rootlets bathed by the leakage of the Nile, were accounted divine and earnestly worshipped by Egyptians of every rank, in the belief that they were animated by spirits, who on occasion could emerge from them. They were habitually honored with fruit offerings, and the charitable found an outlet for their benevolence in daily replenishing the water jars beneath them for the use of passerby, who in his turn would express his gratitude for the boon by reciting a prayer to the deity of the tree. So I think that is absolutely a beautiful thought. People who had the means putting water there for the people who were traveling and may have run out. And in return, they would offer up gratitude and thanks and a prayer to the deity, whoever they may be, of this tree, just of honest thanks and, respect to them because of what the people who worship them have given. So it's very reciprocal in a lot of ways, right? The most famous of these sycamores, the sycamore of the south, was regarded as the living body of Hathor upon earth. And the tree at Metairie, I did not say that right, commonly called the tree of the Virgin, is probably the successor of the sacred tree of Heliopolis, in which a goddess, perhaps Hathor, was also worshipped. The district around Memphis was known as the land of the sycamore and contained several trees generally believed to be inhabited by detached doubles of Nut and Hathor. Similar trees are worshipped at the present day by both Christian and Musulman falahin. I'm not sure what that means or what that faith is exactly. I haven't heard that term before. But yes, the sycamore. When I saw that, I was actually very intrigued to see all of the information about that, because I felt like I wanted to read more about these sycamores. I feel like I've heard it, but I also didn't really know much about that. So I looked it up, and it says that the sycamore was also used to separate Upper and Lower Egypt. You could see a kind of a line of sycamores to judge the difference between the two parts of the country, I guess, the two countries. The Book of the Dead also says two sycamores are at the eastern gate of heaven from which the sun god Ra emerged each morning. The sycamore was regarded as a manifestation of the goddesses Nut, Isis, and most of all, especially Hathor. And and she was given the epithet of Lady of the Sycamore. Sycamores were often planted near tombs, and burial in coffins made of sycamore wood returned the dead person to the womb of the mother tree goddess. Also, the tree Mary and Joseph rested under on their flight into Egypt was a sycamore, and the fruit, sap, and bark of the sycamore are used for medicine. Isn't this amazing? What a sacred tree that is used by all these people who just understand its nature as a healer and its divinity, its appearance, and all of these very sacred times. We're going to get more into these types of trees, but let me see. Now we're going to finally get into Darfur, Sahara, the Guinea coast, throughout the African continent. We're moving our way through Egypt into Africa. On the outskirts of the province of Darfur, the Bidayat Arabs, though surrounded by Muslim tribes, still adhered to their same culture. Under the wide-spreading branches of an enormous hegelic tree, which is the resting place of marabou storks south of the Sahara, and on a spot kept beautifully clean and sprinkled with fine sand, they beseech an unknown god to direct them in their undertakings and to protect them from danger. They have, in short, retained, in spite of all the pressures of Islamism, their old worshipping ways, which still widely prevail among the races of the African continent. Thus, on the Guinea coast, almost every village has its sacred tree, and in some parts, offerings are still made to them. The people of the Congo plant a sacred tree before their house and set jars of palm wine under it for the tree spirit. So this, I'm going to take a quick break to say I absolutely love this idea of having the tree of the home or a tree in front of your home kept there. I also thought of the palm wine being put there under it for the tree spirit. We always have had offerings of spirits for the spirits, right? So the wine being an offering, continued offering, I think is just par for the course, right? Just another thing that refers to us continuing to hold on to those things all this time here in the diaspora. In Dahomey, prayers and gifts are offered to trees in times of sickness. One of the goddesses of the Fonte, the Akan of Ghana, has her abode in huge cotton trees. Now, this part I was like really surprised to see, actually. Not surprised, but just, it's always shocking to see the cotton in different ways. I remember when I first saw cotton on people's altars or in people's homes, I was like not for it. I did not like it, but I didn't say anything because obviously everybody has their own different feelings, and we have a connection with that plant. Same way we have a connection with tobacco, and we have a connection with let me think, what do we have? Lemongrass. There's a few things here that, you know, we've used and we've worked with and they've been available to us. So we managed to gain some kind of connection to those plants. But with the cotton one, it's just so well known as negative that I've always had a real hard time with it. But when I read this, back when I found this book, I was just so impressed because of that cotton connection prior to America that one could also be drawing on. And so I was very interested in seeing, you know, how this connection with the Dahomey, with their connection with the cotton trees was, especially because we're West African and, you know, cotton has found its way throughout Black American conjure tradition, which I always assumed just kind of was one of those things we got here in America, but in fact came prior, and a lot of people did bring this with them. So I read up on this a little bit to learn more, to, you know, debunk my assumptions. And I learned that, you know, there are a lot of huge sacred cotton trees in Africa. Notably, there's one in Sierra Leone, and we're going to talk about that one another time, but I did want to see if I could hold up my tablet and show you this Fonte flag, which is very similar to the way I quilt, which I thought was really cool, just with this applique. And it's essentially, it says it is depicting the tree of life, knowledge, and a figure in spotted shorts on a yellow background with a striped background and the Ghanaian flag in the corner. So they use these flags for various things, spiritual and otherwise, but you can get the general gist of it. I thought that was really impressive to learn about, and really turn on a head things I thought about Cotten and, my own connection with it, to perhaps be more open, even more so than I was. I felt like I was pretty open. Like, I never, like, called someone out and was like, why you got Cotten? Or, like, the Cotton's nasty or something, It was never like that. But at any rate, in the Nyasa country, now called Malawi, where the spirits of the dead are worshipped as gods, aka ancestor veneration, right? Working with your ancestors. The ceremonies are conducted and offerings placed not at the grave of a dead man, but at the foot of the tree which grows before his house, or, if that be unsuitable, beneath some especially beautiful tree specifically selected for this purpose. So, that part I really thought was powerful, that they mention that sometimes you don't have a specific tree, a specific thing, the perfect thing to use at that time. Maybe this person didn't have a house. Maybe this person wasn't originally from here, didn't have time to settle into that type of thing, was living with somebody else, blah, 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 blah. There's could be something is going on, right? So you have to create and make do when there isn't another option. So that means that, and again, you're specifically choosing, you're not just like storming out, oh, I have nothing. Okay, I'm choosing that tree right there. Whatever's growing right outside my window, that's the tree. For me, I walked around to all the trees on my property, and there's this grove over here where these like four branches, these four trees kind of, I can't honestly tell if it's, if this are five, I think I can't tell if it's all one tree and that's how this tree grows, but the way it's grown up like a kind of hand, these five fingers coming up, has like a pocket of space where you can sit and relax and kind of just enjoy yourself and spend time with the tree. It's kind of in the front, so a little more public perhaps than I mostly prefer. But of all the trees on the property, that's definitely the one that I felt energetically connected with and enjoyed. It's, I enjoyed the connection with it, and I was able to really connect with it in that way. So, there are other trees that were perhaps more private, or I guess aesthetically pleasing if you like trees that are a little more green. But on the other hand, it's really about using your intuition. It's about talking, about, doing your divination. So, if the answer is yes or no, or maybe you should be trying another day, and I also really love, like I said, there we have it again, that idea of a tree for the household, a tree planted for a person and cared, or a tree planted for the ancestors when they pass. So here we go. Let me see, where were we? And that is like when you use a tree that isn't exactly the tree that this person knew, or this person like planted, blah, blah, blah. That's more of a symbolic connection, right? Less of the physical connection for the root work that you're doing. So to return to ancient Egypt, there is evidence that the great Osiris was originally a tree god. According to Egyptian mythology, after he had been murdered, his coffin was discovered enclosed in a tree trunk, and he is spoken of in the inscriptions as the one in the tree, the solitary one in the acacia, which is the plant that giraffes eat, right? The tree. The rites, too, by which his death and burial were annually celebrated appear to couple him closely with Tammuz, who was an ancient Mesopotamian god associated with shepherds, who was also the primary consort of the goddess Inanna, aka Ishtar. He was also associated with Adonis, who is the god of beauty and desire, first of Mesopotamia, then of Lebanon, and then Greece, or which is now Lebanon, and then Greece, whose mother was transformed into a myrrh tree, and Adonis was born from his mother while she was in that state of being a myrrh tree. There's Attis, the god of vegetation, consort of mother of gods Cybele and Phrygian in Greek mythology. His priests were eunuchs, the Gali, and he was also self-castrated due to some infidelity, but I'm pretty sure the main point of that was he was the god of vegetation. And finally, there was Dionysus, the god of fertility and wine, harvesting grapes, later considered a patron of the arts, someone who could be very angry, very inspired, joy, divine, ecstasy. So basically, the dual nature of the drink, of alcohol, how sometimes it can give you a lot of, happy times and inspiration with things. And then it can also make you very angry, so there's the ecstasy, the happy times, and then there's the wild times where you really lose control. So it very much has a dual nature, and this god did as well. And there were other gods whose worship was associated with a similar ritual. Mr. Fraser, following Manhart, contends that all these deities were tree gods, and that all the ceremonial connection with their worship was symbolical of the annual death and revival of vegetation. It is certainly true that in Babylonia, Egypt, Phoenicia, and above all, Phrygia, a peculiarly emotional form of worship, which subsequently extended on to Cyprus, Crete, Greece, and Italy, arose in connection with deities who were closely associated with vegetable life. The Damaras of South Africa believed that the universal progenitor was a tree, out of which came Damaras, Bushmen, oxen, and zebra, and everything else that lives. That's from chapter 4, the tree and its relation to human life. So I looked up progenitor because I assumed it meant creator, but I wanted to see what the word meant. And it says it is a person or thing from which a person, animal, or plant is descended or originates, an ancestor or parent. In genealogy, the progenitor is the sometimes legendary founder of a family line of descent, clan, or tribe, noble house, or people group. Genealogy understands a progenitor to be the earliest recorded ancestor of a consanguineous family group of descendants. So I was thinking that this is a really cool way to think of it, a beautiful way to think of it, that the legendary origin of humanity is basically the earth, the trees specifically sprouting forth. There are many legends of gods being born in trees, and with that in mind, we can consider the greatness of our existence, our conscious existence, and what it means, the power that we each hold within us, and the ashe that's within us, and the ashe of where we come from, and, us in our own way being gods, being goddesses, and wielding that ashe within us as individuals here on the planet. An ashe that comes from the very ground we stand on. So the immortality of the soul was accepted, but there was always an inclination to quarter it with a new living things. The instances above given in which it was thought to pass into some plants, especially, also illustrate the belief that trees and shrubs might contain a spirit in human form. A further assumed kinship between human and vegetable life is the conception of the tree as sympathetically interwoven with the life and fortunes of an individual, a family, or a community. In folktales, the life of a person is sometimes so bound up with the life of a plant that the withering of the plant will immediately follow or be followed by the death of that person, right? I told you about my mother-in-law's bamboo plant, and she sung to it, talked to it, all of that, and literally within a week or so of her passing, the plant was fading into a tan color and no more. Among the Mbengas in Western Africa, about the Gaboon, when two children are born on the same day, the people plant two trees of the same kind and dance around them. So the circle being part of that spiritual concept of the creating of a circle around the trees with the dancing itself, the movements, the meaning behind the dancing, all of that is this form of prayer, facilitating the energy, all of that. So if one of the trees dies or is thrown down, they're sure that the child will most likely pass on too soon. In the Cameroons, also, the life of a person is believed to be sympathetically bound up with that of the tree. Some of the Papuans unite the life of a newborn child sympathetically with that of a tree by driving a pebble into the bark of the tree. So there we have a way of like marking the tree, of, having a place that was made into the tree for you specifically. And these are both things made of nature that connect a child with the tree. This is supposed to give them mastery over the child's life. If the tree is cut down, the child will die. So there is a connection spiritually with this tree once this occurs. But then, the child could also use this energy for themselves. According to the Talmud, the destruction of Bithar, in which 400,000 Israelites lost their lives, originated in the resentment of one of its inhabitants at the wanton destruction of a young cedar tree, which, according to the custom of the place, he had planted at the birth of his child. I mean, that seems like such a steep loss, but it means a lot to a lot of people, and it's a source of, disrespect, essentially, to be doing this. You know what it means symbolically, but you still go ahead and do this. So it's sad that so many passed, but it also speaks to the very entrenched nature of these customs, and what they mean to people, what they mean to them after they've connected with somebody else. There is honor, spirit, and spiritual energy within the trees. So working with them allows us to facilitate a relationship with the world around us at large, as well as with each other, our ancestors, ourselves. And so this is another excerpt that I wanted to read that is, I think, one of our final ones, one of the last ones I wanted to read. However, this one doesn't take place necessarily in Africa, but I thought it still had really good information to share and learn. So we're going to go ahead and read this last part anyway. They said, more importantly than the family tree is the community tree. In many an old German village there stood a tree, often a May tree, which the villagers guarded as the apple of their eye. It was looked upon as the life tree, the tutelary genius, the second eye of the whole community. Devotions were paid to it, gifts offered to it as to a deity. The ancient fig tree in the Comichium at Rome, already alluded to as a supposed descendant of the very tree under which Romulus and Remus were found, is another case in point. It was held to be closely connected with the fortunes of the city, and Tacitus describes this terror of the Romans when, in the reign of Nero, it suddenly began to flag and wither, and their relief when, upon the emperor's death, it was found to have renewed its vigor. Pliny tells of two myrtle trees, called the patrician and the plebeian, which grew before the temple of Quirinus at Rome. As sacred to Venus, and hence symbolical of union, these trees were held to represent the amity which existed between the two orders. At first they had grown in equal vigor, but when the patricians began to encroach their power of the plebs, their tree outgrew the other, which languished beneath its baleful shadow. After the Marsian War, however, from which date the power of the Senate began to decline, it was noted that the patrician tree showed signs of age, whereas the plebeian tree now was able to sprout forth with new vigor. Isn't that an interesting situation wherein two, I guess, political parties would be the simplest way to say, had their own two trees, and it was supposed to be a union of work, but when one started to get more work or more power over the other, their tree grew more, and its shadow made it so that the other's tree could not grow. But later on, as the power kind of started to shift, the bigger tree aged a little faster. It did a little too much there, and so that gave the second tree an ability to grow faster. So there is this connection between these trees and the world around them, not just through nature, such as a drought, but also through family, politics, their life force, other situations of energetic exchange, which are clearly recorded and noted by the people around them. I was especially intrigued by this reading today because you all know that I am trying to manifest us to have that physical space for the Sankofa Ancestor Shrine, and so we'll have that physical shrine or temple, and this will also hopefully be complete with land that we'll be able to host ourselves outside, to have time to walk around there, and eventually it would be a very beautiful dream for us to have a cemetery as well, wherein we're able to have these spaces, plant trees, have these little shrines with the trees next to them, or the tree itself be the shrine, and them people who venerate their ancestors can have this safe space to lay them down beneath the trees, plant the trees, leave offerings, build the altars, create beautiful sacred resting places, and occasionally maybe go and spend time with them at the altar. I always love the Day of the Dead celebration because of the way they make it look like a living room. They'll bring in sofas and beautiful lights and decor, and it will be just set up very fantastically and beautifully as they spend this time in the cemetery with their ancestors. And it would be beautiful to have that type of space for us as well. And also thinking of the way that the trees can really be a symbolic way of, being the center of a town, of a village. I did just read the part where they were talking about, this ancient fig tree and the May tree in ancient and older German villages, and the way the whole town, connected with it because it was bigger than your family. It was bigger than you. It was us. It was a collective I, as they said. And that's something that you also see like with those cotton trees. When you please look up the cotton trees of Africa, and the pictures will almost stun you for a second because they seem fake. It's just this huge tree in the middle of a city. And there's buildings everywhere. There's people, there's cars, and these trees are just huge, ancient and huge. And so, the condescending tone of this book would have you be like, what? Why are people leaving offerings at the tree? But this is one of those situations where, this thing is so big and so beautiful and so much older than you, so much grander than you. You can see where people, even the most non-religious person, would get a sense of awe, a sense of wonder, a sense of wanting to go put a hand on it, lay a hand on it, or, pour water at its feet to help it in some way, to give to it, because it's just so grand and so amazing to look at. I think the one I'm talking about was the one in Sierra Leone. But there's several that are just huge trees. And, I think being able to be humble is really good with this type of, with not just with religion, but with life. Being able to be humble in the face of something so great and so wonderful, regardless of whether you're religious, spiritual, etc., I think is a good trait to have, to be able to recognize the greatness of Mother Earth and the things which are produced here, that so much far beyond us, but it's also a part of us. It's a part of our world. It's something worth protecting. So at any rate, that is all I wanted to say. I wanted to inspire us for our vision of the future, for when the Sankofa Ancestor Shrine is a place you and I go to see each other every week and just, see each other eye to eye, or, it's a beautiful space. So when I stream it on videos, it will be a really inspiring and beautiful thing for others to tune in wherever they are in the world, and they'll be able to look in and see all these beautiful, colors, and just a very sacred, well put together space, right? So other than that, I think we're done for today. We'll have another message for the ancestors next week, and I'm also working. I haven't forgotten about my project with the we're supposed to be making those patches, and recently actually I've started putting them together so that I can make them into prayer flags, I think is what they're called. This is something that it was used, I want to say, in like Tibet and surrounding areas, but very quickly spread off into Christianity, other pagan religions. Wiccans use these. People who practice like specific European ancient religions use them. And I was like, actually, this would be a really amazing thing to have, I think. It would be a really beautiful thing to have. Prayer flags are usually hung up either inside, but typically they're hung up outside. And as they fade away, they the message of them is spread, right? And so the prayer is written on them, but there's often drawings and little ways to sew onto them, etc. And basically, long story short, I'm going to be trying to put mine into that because I decided I didn't want them on a jacket. I didn't want that jacket. I ended up, for my winter coat replacement, getting myself a cloak. And while I could technically buy a denim jacket to do this with, to put put those beautiful patches on, I was just like, girl, why waste money on another jacket you don't need when you could literally put these on a beautiful string them together and hang them up somewhere, decorate your house and put it right out here on this fence. You know what I mean? I could do something with that. And so I got really excited about the idea of making these little prayer flags. I'm stringing, however many gateways it is we have. I think I've made 12. I think I said we were doing one for every month, and then I fell off like month 6. I don't know. Anyways, long story short, I'm going to go ahead and redo that, make some videos, show you what I already have, show you what I'm doing. In fact, I might make the next video showing you my process to make, I think I was on Sacred Beauty is where I left off. So we're going to be doing that. Thank you to all my patrons. Thank you so, so much. Thank you for, sticking with me. Thank you to the people who like, comment, share, subscribe, all those things. Help boost these videos and share them to other people who would want to be interested, who want to know. And I think that's going to be great. It's going to be great to continue to grow with you. And I have so many fun things to share with you guys that we're going to have a great rest of this year, I assure you. You and I are going to be continuing to learn and grow with the ancestors so much. Please, if you're struggling to connect with your ancestors, make yourself an altar. Do that white cloth, a cup of water, and a white candle. Boom, you're done. Finished, finito, and pray. Honey, this is free, and those things are as cheap as it gets. We all have a cup. We all have like a white t-shirt we could cut up, and a lot of us have tea lights. I personally right now don't. Oh, but I do have a white candle. So you always have a white candle, don't you? We always have something to use. So it's simple. Just talk with your ancestors today. Pray with your ancestors today. Do something with your ancestors today. Go sit at that altar and make that connection, make that moment memories with your ancestors. It's a very simple process, very beautiful. Clap your hands 3 times to make that noise and wake up the energy of the room and get that started. Don't forget it. All right, so may your ancestors and spirit guides be with you at every crossroads. Go ahead and check out that Sacred Tree book. I put it on the Patreon, and I'm going to put a link down below too. And I will see you next time.